Welcome to This Explainer. Right now, we're looking at what is arguably one of the most consequential macroeconomic environments since 2008 financial crisis. Over the past few months, this massive conflict in the Middle East has just completely rewritten the global energy landscape. But look, today we aren't just regurgitating the news. We're going to connect these giant global geopolitical shifts straight to your personal finances. And we're doing it using verified data from places like the Dallas Federal Reserve, the Center for Economic Policy Research, and major financial institutions. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's the roadmap for our macro to micro journey today. We'll start with the Strait of Hormuz crisis. Then look at the direct impact on your wallet, touch on the evolving deals and tariffs, review the impact on your investments, and wrap up with 7 actionable moves to protect your money. All right, part 1, the Strait of Hormuz crisis. Let's get into the context. Let's lay out the exact timeline of events that sparked this market shock. And remember, we're looking at this strictly as market catalysts. So prior to February 2026, we saw a significant U.S. military buildup in the Middle East. Then, on February 28th, joint U.S. and Israeli strikes hit Iran. Just a few days later, on March 4th, Iran effectively closed the Strait of Hormuz, severely threatening maritime traffic. Boom! That closure jolted the world economy almost instantly. And bringing us up to today, May 25th, a deal to reopen the strait has been agreed upon in principle, though honestly, it's incredibly fragile. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what this specific geographical choke point actually represents and why it matters to literally everyone. The Strait of Hormuz is this narrow, 21-mile-wide waterway. It's an absolute lifeline for the transit of oil and natural gas to world markets, controlled on one side by Iran. It's narrow, it's highly vulnerable, and its status basically dictates the cost of energy across the entire globe. I mean, just think about the sheer volume of global trade we're talking about here. Roughly 27% of the world's maritime trade in crude oil and petroleum products flows right through this one strait. We're talking approximately 20 million barrels a day. To put that into perspective, that is enough oil to fill over 1,000 Olympic swimming pools every single day. Essentially, 1 in 5 barrels of oil used anywhere on Earth squeezes through this 21-mile gap. And what made this specific crisis so severe is that neighboring backup infrastructure in places like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, well, they were threatened too, totally compromising the world's ability to replace the lost supply. And we don't have to just guess at the magnitude of this supply disruption. The International Energy Agency assessed the severity of this crisis incredibly bluntly, calling it the biggest energy disruption in history, period. When you suddenly cut off a fifth of the world's oil supply, the price mechanism is just brutal. Supply plummets, demand stays exactly the same, and prices, they inevitably spike. Which brings us to part 2, the impact on your wallet. Let's bring this down to the household level. The immediate global market reaction to the strait's closure was, frankly, historic. Brent crude, which is the main international benchmark for oil, hit a massive $108.11 per barrel. A number like that, it fundamentally alters the baseline cost of global manufacturing, plastics, fertilizers, and, of course, transportation. But here is the number that hits home directly, $4.10. U.S. average gas prices climbed by more than $1 a gallon in just 6 weeks to surpass $4.10. That's the highest level since 2022. Think about it. For an average American driving, say, 15,000 miles a year, a $1 increase costs over $500 more annually, just at the pump. For a family with 2 cars, you're looking at over $1,000 drained straight from the household budget. No way around it. And let's look at how this compounds. It's a classic domino effect. Step 1, it starts with the energy shock. Then, because pretty much all delivery trucks run on diesel, step 2 hits, higher gas and grocery costs. Which leads right into step 3. Broader inflation goes up. Because inflation is running hot, we hit step 4. The Federal Reserve delays their expected rate cuts, meaning your mortgage, your car loan, and your credit card rates, they all stay elevated. Finally, step 5. As consumers get squeezed by all of this, spending drops, businesses lose revenue, and suddenly we're facing an economic slowdown. All right, moving to part 3, evolving deals and tariffs. Let's look at the parallel global events. We're actually seeing a massive contrast happening right now. On the good news front, a recent trade truce lowered overall tariff rates on Chinese imports from 41% down to 31%. Plus, China agreed to buy $17 billion in U.S. agricultural products, so that offers some much-needed modest relief on consumer goods. But then, look at the ongoing pressure side. The U.S. has proposed a brand new 25% tariff on countries doing business with Iran, which presumably would include China. So the US is essentially trying to shake hands with China on one deal while simultaneously threatening to slap tariffs on them for another. It's this immense, totally contradictory tension that could so easily reignite trade hostilities. Let's shift gears to part 4, impact on your investments. How is this shaking up the markets? As you'd expect, markets have been incredibly volatile, but there are some very clear winners and losers here. Energy and defense stocks, they've surged significantly. On the flip side, consumer discretionary stocks have fallen as people naturally cut back on non-essential spending. Over in the bond market, the 10-year Treasury yield has moved upward, meaning bond prices are down and borrowing costs are staying high. And this brilliantly illustrates why holding a diversified index fund is just so absolutely crucial. By owning the whole market, you get automatic exposure to that surging energy sector. That naturally offsets the losses in consumer stocks, and you don't have to sit there trying to guess which way the geopolitical winds are going to blow next. Finally, part 5, 7 moves to protect your money. Let's get highly actionable. Okay, move 1. Lock in your gas spending. Start using real-time price apps like Gas Buddy. Seriously, finding just a 40-cent difference per gallon adds up to hundreds of dollars a year in savings. Move 2. Get your idle cash into a high-yield savings account, earning a minimum of 4.5%. In an inflationary environment that's being driven by an energy shock, cash sitting in a traditional bank earning 0 is literally losing its purchasing power every single day. Move 3. Please do not panic sell your long-term investments. History shows us over and over that markets ultimately recover from geopolitical shocks. Selling at the bottom just locks in those losses. Moving right along, move 4. Take a look at the energy exposure in your portfolio. Make sure you aren't heavily over-concentrated in just one sector, like tech, while totally missing out on those energy gains. Move 5. Audit and reduce your daily energy consumption. It sounds small, but behavioral changes, like nudging your thermostat a few degrees or consolidating your car trips, they directly offset these higher costs. And move 6, this is absolutely critical. Build or maintain a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. Because of that economic slowdown we mapped out in the domino effect, there is a very real elevated risk of job market softness right now. That emergency fund is your ultimate buffer. And finally, move 7. Watch this pending May 25th Iran peace deal incredibly closely. There are still massive sticking points, mainly regarding uranium stockpiles and sanctions relief. But so, the crucial point is this. It is the single biggest market catalyst in the world right now. If a formal agreement is actually signed to end the blockade and let Iranian oil flow back onto the market, oil prices will fall and your cost of living will start to decrease shortly after. That deal signing, it could be the absolute perfect signal if you've been holding out to make a major financial move or a big purchase. But look, we have to remember that this situation is extremely delicate. Nothing is guaranteed here, which leaves us with this final kind of provocative thought. If the Iran peace deal falls through tomorrow, is your personal portfolio truly prepared for 100+ oil lasting all the way through 2027? It's a really critical question, and it demands a careful review of your own financial resilience. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.